Do we not need to approve meeting minutes?
We don't have them, so we have to go next time.
Okay. So bring it to new business, and I'll turn it over to city and county staff to present the draft of the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, everybody. We've got copies of the comprehensive plan draft on the seats. Probably have enough if anybody wants to, don't want to get closer. We have, I've got a copy of the slides. As well. We're going to go a little bit out of order in terms of the way some of these categories show up on the draft of the comprehensive plan. And the reason for that is this is the planning and zoning board is going to look at this, so we're going to at least start off with some of the categories that are geared a little bit more towards some of the things that they'll look at as the years go on. We're going to go through each section of the comprehensive document, and after each section we'll pause. I'll turn it over to the board for comments and discussions, questions, however we want to kind of take this thing. We want it to be interactive amongst the board to discuss the goals and objectives that we've come up with, but also to get your input on those goals and objectives. It is a working document, so you all can suggest new goals and objectives to throw in there. You can make recommendations on things that you don't like. We'll take that stuff back to council eventually for their consideration. And then depending on how long you all want to go tonight, we do not have to get through this all tonight. It is quite extensive, and depending on how the conversations go, we can always come back in December and even after the first of the year for discussions. Are lively, and there's a lot of information going around, so no rush tonight. I'll let you all kind of dictate. Chairman, if you feel like we kind of run our course of the evening, just let me know and we'll move on. So the reason we're here is reviewing a draft of our city comprehensive plan. Just real quick, comprehensive plan is a long-range policy document and serves as a guide for elected officials, administrators, and citizens in making informed decisions that will affect our community. It's an open and concentrated effort by the community to determine what our needs are, to set goals and priorities for the future. So just kind of a brief background of how we got to this point in the game. We hired the Northern Kentucky Area Development District to help procure the document. They put this draft together in collaboration with the city. We also put together a special board that was made up of some city council members, school and city administration, and citizens at large, and they helped meet and formulate the goals and objectives that we're going to review here tonight. After they kind of formulated those goals and objectives, we held a public, open public meeting for everybody to come in, and they could review those goals and objectives, and they had an opportunity to kind of weigh and highlight which goals and objectives they were in favor of, which led to this document today that will show those goals and objectives. So this portion, we want the Planning and Zoning Board to kind of review the document, make recommendations of things to add or remove, and as I said earlier, these comments will be forwarded on to the Dayton City Council. We'll probably get a subcommittee of council together to review your all's recommendations today, and then we'll take that forward to the entire city council at some point in the future for final adoption. But what we're kind of going to focus on the early stages of this meeting is emphasis on zoning, land use, and our land use maps. But then we can also obviously discuss and make comments on all the goals and objectives for each category.
So I'm gonna get some short clarification. So any recommendations or edits or basically any amendments we make to they're all suggested and council can reject them.
Correct.
So we won't see a final draft basically.
The final draft you'll see will be what is ultimately published and adopted by the city council.
Okay.
So your comments and stuff will be recommendations.
So there's not a second step here, whereas we'll see what the draft looks like with our recommendations.
No, other than me, just I can forward you kind of a recap, amended version, so you all can make sure that what you all said and relayed was conveyed properly. These are the 5 categories that we're going to be looking at through this process: land use, housing, economic development, transportation, and community facilities. So just kind of a brief recap for those that may know the goals and objectives of each category, just to kind of define what those are, to help keep some of our discussions kind of on topic. So a goal is just a general statement that represents a long-term vision So it's a concise statement, and the objectives define strategies to obtain that goal. They're typically more specific and measurable. And they have several objective statements for any particular goal. So this is our first category. As I said, we'll kind of skip around in the formal document. This is the land use section. And highlighted in blue in each of these sections are the goals that were established to date through the process. So the first goal and objective in land use is to establish future land use maps that strengthen Dayton's identity and is current with the changing growth conditions in the region. Another goal is to locate and design new development that will be compatible with adjacent uses and will benefit the public health, safety, welfare of the community. A couple of the objectives in that category to encourage redevelopment or adaptive reuse of vacant and underutilized buildings and sites, promote infill developments to encourage a more compact form and avoid costly sprawl, and adopt smart growth principles. And then the last goal and objective is establish 6th Street as the commercial mixed-use center of Dayton. And some of those objectives: promote a mix of neighborhood commercial uses along Main Street, including residential, retail, office, and community spaces. And then the last objective to that category, support a pedestrian-oriented design, features that such as lighting, street furniture, and signage. So I just kind of want to highlight, this is our current zoning map. Right now, 66% of our zoning map is comprised of residential, 30% commercial, and 4% industrial. So this represents what each section of our community is categorized as, the most dominant one being R1JJ, which is single-family residential. And just to kind of give you some of my input in terms of some of the challenges we've run into mostly with zoning as of the last several years, deals with the I-1 zone, which is highlighted by the arrow there on the map. It's the industrial park down on the eastern end of town. In particular, in that zone, there is a 2-block stretch of single-family residential homes. This is comprised of the 900 and 1000 blocks of 3rd and 4th Street between Main and Kenton. The issue that we're having here is it's zoned industrial, but 99% of those 2 blocks are single-family residential homes. And the reason that's an issue is those single-family homes are what's considered pre-existing non-conforming uses, meaning it was the city's intention at some point to see those single-family homes go away and become industrial related to that zone. That did not happen. At some point in time, the city stopped acquiring property down there on a routine basis. So what we have is an influx of homes down there that have been neglected, and they're actually restricted on what they can do to improve their properties because of their status as pre-existing non-conforming uses. So we have houses that can't really improve, they have difficulty selling, and by a combination of all those things have fallen into a little bit tired of a state. So what we have kind of pushed through this process, and what I would encourage in some of this discussion is to, for the future, as we look at maybe some zoning changes, to really put that on the front burner, because it's something that several people are dealing with severe challenges down there. Again, in terms of selling their homes and fixing them up, it's kind of a difficult situation for them. The city really hasn't shown. It's really the decade that I've been here that any strong consideration for large-scale purchasing of these properties is kind of like the chicken and the egg. We could go down and buy property, but there's really nobody knocking on our door to develop there. No one really wants to develop unless the city's acquired the property. So it's kind of a situation that we can certainly talk about and define what it is, at least your all's recommendations in terms of how you feel about that. So that was kind of the main one I wanted to highlight. This is our existing land use map. There are some things that need to be updated on this. Just some things during the draft process that are incorrect in terms of we're missing a couple park locations. It just kind of needs to be tidied up a bit. For the most part, this identifies throughout the community what each individual parcel is being currently used for. This is a breakdown of that prior slide there. As you can see, 39% of our uses is residential single family. The second biggest category is undeveloped. And the reason I bring this up is because I think we're gonna see a major change, obviously, in that category. A lot of what's undeveloped on this map is Manhattan Harbor. And we have made some pretty good progresses, especially in the last couple of weeks, for some serious action down there. So I think over the next 5 years, that percentage is gonna change drastically, which will bring into play really the commercial retail and multifamily being our next two highest percentages in terms of land use. I'm gonna kind of skip over the first section of the comprehensive plan that deals with population figures, because again, I think in the next 5 years, if Manhattan Harbor picks up as it appears it's going to, a lot of that data is really gonna change quickly, and it could become a moot point. So I'm not gonna dive into it this very much during this section unless it's something you all want to talk about. This is a draft of what our future land use map could look like, and this will kind of snowball into the discussion that we'll have tonight about what areas we want to look at in terms of potential changes and recommendations we would want to make for certain areas of town. And then just a few things to consider, and then I'll open it up for discussion. Again, I touched on the industrial one zone and the need to look at the zoning there and some of the problems we're having. Kind of in tandem with that, conditional uses for single-family zones is something that we've looked at in pretty recent past, and it's something that's actually probably going to come up in December. I got a motion last night from our city council to review a specific instance where a conditional use text amendment may be needed. So that's very relevant in some of the things that we're going to tackle here in the near future. Parking ratios is something we've also looked at. And then obviously our park on the riverfront in terms of future land use is something we can include on this slide that isn't, again, this is just kind of a working draft. So that's our land use section. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to the board for any questions, any comments, and then you'll probably have time to review the document. So
Do we want to discuss first, or do we want to have comments regarding land use from the audience prior to? Doesn't matter. I just know the mayor and a city council member here, several community members. You guys, does anybody have anything they want to, 2 cents they want to add to the land use before we kind of dive in up here?
I'm glad you mentioned that block at 3rd and 4th Street with the industrial zone, because we still have vacant lots down there that are in the industrial zone closer to the flood wall. And I've heard from a couple of those residents too, and they are, as you said, rock and hard place.
Yeah.
What can be done?
we would, in that instance, we would just need to rezone those 2 blocks. R1JJ makes the most sense, but we also have to take into account, I think there still are a few businesses that are in there, so we kind of need to be, R1JJ seems simple because that's the majority of what those 2 blocks are, but.
You don't want to recreate the same issue.
Right, then all of a sudden you have businesses that are open that are.
Could we do like an urban mix zone?
Yeah, I think
Where it's like for the whole industrial area, because I also have heard that there's a lot of variances for like light manufacturing going in there, and it's really, the zone is industrial, not manufacturing. We kind of need a little bit of both to fill the space.
Yeah, and it's probably a good time to have that conversation. It was probably gonna come up under economic development, but one of the ideas for our end is to kind of rethink what that zone even is, because the type of industry that is approved down there is hard to attract or even non-existent now. So we kind of have to rethink who it is we're trying to attract, who it is that's down there, what's their potential for growth, and making it user-friendly for everything. But we're going to have to start attracting a new type of business, because the ones that are mostly down there now, they're not banging on the door to come in here. So I think we need to rethink that.
So like, for the purpose of the future land use map and code for this, like what could be a recommendation we could make? Could we recommend like that it be an urban mixed zone or a manufacturing slash light industrial residential zone?
Well, I think you could look under, even the first goal and objective, establish future land use maps that strengthen Dayton's identity. You know, an objective there could be, you know, taking a strategic look at certain zones and making sure they're up to date with the current times. And maybe even thinking above and beyond any zone that we might currently have in town, and thinking and looking at other communities to see that have different zones that may not be anything that we have that could fit the mold for that particular area to open it up. So we could probably utilize that. I do want to, Dominique DeLucia's here with the Northern Kentucky Ag District, so she was very monumental in putting this all together. Fresh off maternity leave, so we welcome her back. Congratulations. But she can kind of, as she's kind of listening here, she can probably start to formulate some of the things you're saying and how we can maybe implement them into some objectives.
I mean, any board member is more than welcome to speak up if they have suggestions. I would just like to see that text box in the plan titled Light Industrial Business Park. Just it's just kind of a more vague, open interpretation, ready for us to come and change it in a year. You know, that would be my recommendation. Whether that's mixed use or mixed or whatever we come up with, cool, fancy terminology.
Would mixed use, if you were to take those two blocks and change them to mixed use, would that then allow the current residents and the property owners to do the improvements on their property?
So I think the solution is finding a particular zone that meets what we're thinking of as mixed use. Even just neighboring communities such as Newport and Newport Thomas, if you go look at their zoning map, they've got specific zones that may fit that we don't even have existing here. So all we really need to do is just find a relative example, and I'm sure we can find it nearby of a particular zone that we can add in if we feel like it's favorable for those type of conditions, where it can free up single-family home use as a permitted use, which is what they should be, while also leaving open the few businesses that may be down in those blocks, so that they can continue to operate as conforming uses too. Because we don't, as Anthony said, we don't want to run into the problem where we switch it back and all of a sudden we've got all these conforming homes, but now the businesses are pre-existing non-conforming uses, then they run into the problem of not being able to fix it. I think it's just a matter of finding a particular zone that meets kind of the mixed use mentality that could qualify.
But you're also saying that the way this is currently written in text, we have the ability to change it later. We don't have to do that text amendment on the light industrial?
We would have to do some sort of zoning change.
Yeah, for the zoning code, I'm talking for the plan, the current plan as written.
Are you comp plan?
Yeah,
So I don't know if I.
like right now, it says future land use, it's got those two blocks in the light industrial business park. That's the future. So should we change that text to, like, I don't know what term we would use.
Yeah, I think that would be relevant to mention in the goals and objectives section, and then show on the future land use what it is those intentions are.
Okay.
And it could say just undefined, or I don't know how we want to kind of color that in, but to indicate that it's our intention to change that what you're indicating.
Yeah. I mean, like, I know we can come back and point to that first goal there and change it unilaterally, but then it looks like we're kind of going against the plan we just passed. So I just thought it would be better to get that text in there.
Yep.
Well, another important part of this change is you're changing that zone down there from industrial to light industrial business park. And we had a couple of, not industries, but businesses move into like the Radac building, like a call center type thing. And I think that opens that area up a lot more to prospective businesses, having it be a business park as well as light industrial.
Well, there is a difference between, so the land use is just kind of indicating what it's used for. It's not technically defining a zone. So there is a little bit of difference between the zoning map, where the zoning map is telling you specifically what it is zoned for. Where the land use is just using a little bit more relative terms to say what it is. So it's just saying that its future use would still be industrial business park. The zone is actually the I-1 zone. It's kind of one and the same. It's just the future land use is just giving a little bit more generic term. Just like if you look at downtown core, it's highlighted in red, it's just indicating that that's a downtown core. The actual zone is central business district. So there is a slight difference between the zoning map, which defines the zones, versus land use is just giving you a little bit more information on specifically what it's being used for in a general term.
Thank you.
So do you require a motion from us and passage for the text change, or?
I don't know if that would be completely
Just a
necessary.
record?
I think just,
That's our
I think
suggestion.
as we get this, we've got everything rolling, and we'll make sure that we get the ideas, and that's what I can put into a recapitulation, to capture what it is we're trying to convey.
I have a question. We have so many empty lots in town. Is there anything prohibiting people building on those lots? Or what can we do to encourage people to use
In
those
some
lots?
cases, yes, in some cases, the lot sizes may not be large enough
Right.
for them to do something with, yeah, that could be something that, could be looked at.
Do we-
If you really wanna get crazy and look at, we've looked at or entertained, container homes or tiny homes, and so there's a way maybe to.
Yeah. I thought there were townhouses
There
coming
are.
by, I think.
You are correct, there are lots that you would think are buildable that actually aren't large enough to build a home.
Is that common in a particular zone?
In an urban area, yeah, that if the zoning hasn't been looked at, or, if it hasn't adjusted with the times.
I'm saying, like, is it common in one of our particular zones that we currently have?
But yeah, the R1JJ is in there.
R1JJ.
Is that because of setbacks?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it just defines that there's a minimum lot size, so I don't even think it has to do with.
Well, actually, you can build on them if they're under, because a legal lot of record can be built upon, but it is sometimes a setback distance. It could be that these are single-family detached homes. Townhouses may not be permitted in these zones. I think JJ is detached, so a townhouse situation would not be permitted. But you can build on them if you can meet the setbacks.
Well, with our zoning here in Dayton, is there still a front, side, and back setback requirement?
Yes.
Yeah, there's.
And what is that?
Depends
12
on the
feet?
zone.
It's different in every zone, and I don't.
I think our one JJ was like 20 feet in the front and 12 feet on the side. I think down the road, that's something we need to re-examine, because some of those lots you're talking about are 25, 30 feet wide, which leaves you a house about 10 feet wide.
I don't think so.
I thought it was 3 feet on the side.
So,
3 feet is the minimum you can do without fire separation, because building code will limit you to, because it has to be 5 feet from anything.
That's from the lot line.
Yeah, from the lot line. So the shortest setback you can have is 3 feet. And I think some of the denser areas do have 3-foot setbacks in Dayton.
And that's still current for new construction in those empty lots she's referring to?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the problem with that is if somebody wants to go up to the property line, that requires a variance, so they go to the Board of Adjustments. It's an extra step to get the thing built.
Understood.
I have a question about some clarification between existing land use and future. If we go back to the existing map, if you come up Dayton Street, up near the water line, so that's kind of level Dayton up there, you will find a significant parcel that is called multifamily residential. And it's just kind of below the word Dayton up there. And it's kind of an L-shaped piece of property. There's a multifamily residential structure there. But most of that land is completely open, nothing there. In fact, there's a road and a parking lot, and beyond that, it looks like a stubble field of some kind. Now, if I go to future land use, it is identified as suburban residential. So in this future land use map, is that limited to multifamily or not? I'm just trying to understand present to where we're going. Is that now, could that be, single-family homes in there now, in that future scenario?
No, so again, the future land use map is just gonna make us making, predictions of what will be the uses for those areas based
Right.
on what the zoning is or what it's currently zoned as.
Okay,
So if the idea of it changes on the future land use map, it can only really change, the zoning doesn't change.
okay,
We
okay.
may just decide that in the future, we think it's going to change because of either the current zone that it's in or some sort of suggestion that it needs to be looked at into a different zone. So like, let's just look at the riverfront. If you look at the riverfront on our future land use, it's undeveloped. But we know it's zoned mixed land use, and we know that there's already been development that started there, and it's gonna continue. So in the future land use map, we're showing it, as riverfront mixed use, because that's what it's zoned for, we know that's where it's gearing towards. And there's some things that probably, so like even on the future land use map, there's some things we need to update as this process goes on. It doesn't highlight a lot of our parks.
Right.
So there's some things that still need to be updated on that. But yeah, it's really just a prediction of what we think will be the uses based on either the zoning or any suggested zoning changes that may need to occur.
So for that parcel that I've identified, it would still be residential multifamily. That's what the zoning is.
Are you referring to like off of Osage Drive down towards?
Like down off of like Fairview Avenue, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
Yeah.
It's R1H right now.
Yeah, yeah. So that's just making a prediction based on it's zoned R1H now, that it could be multifamily in the future because that's what R1,
Yep.
what's R1H?
R1H, and then you have R2 coming off of
Yeah,
Fairview.
has the ability for single family and multifamily use.
oh, so it definitely.
I think it does, I'm going off of my memory.
Because I go by there all the time, and I'm like, hey, that's
It's a developable spot.
very developable, very, and I was really looking who owns it, but,
I think, our former chair, Mr. Rogers, owns it. So,
okay.
former chair.
Did you have a comment? I, kind of while we're on this topic, I know we kind of, as a city, we teeter between urban, suburban, but I was looking at some of this language and I really don't see a need for rural residential zone for future land use. Like with 3 to 5 residentials per acre, land, they're not making more land.
On our future land use map?
Yeah.
So that's the lightest shaded,
Yeah, it's the really light shaded stuff, and, as housing becomes less affordable, we'll need more of it, and this type of zone, isn't really prime for future, what should be the future.
Again, I think it's just defining it as, it may be the same, some of those areas are R1JJ, single family zones, just like a house on Second Street would be. This is just, I guess, Dominique, it's just defining it as, just really a location thing. It's considered more rural, even though it may be the same zone.
Yeah.
I don't know what implications it has, other than just kind of defining it as, it appears more rural than suburban, is that?
Yeah, it's just mainly speaking to the density levels.
Yeah, that's what.
Lower
that's what
density
I'm
residential
saying,
there,
like,
and then it kind of
but
grows.
if we're using this as a tool for the future and a guiding document
Okay,
to
so
make
you wanna
decisions,
eventually see more density in that area?
I would like to see more density. I'm a little bit different. I would prefer just to see all traditional residential. I know that's not the most popular opinion, but, I don't see a need for that in
Okay.
this community.
Okay.
I think for the future specifically, we're going to, single-family districts have to adopt to some 3-family units and townhomes in, unique lots. So I think that doesn't really have a place for our future.
Yeah. I can definitely include that. I know I kind of kept these three kind of residential designations just to allow for that mix of housing types and styles, so that it's not going all in one direction,
Yeah,
so.
and I'm not trying to force it in any one direction.
Yeah.
Like, I obviously understand there's the American dream if people want their, you know, their plot of land and their single-family home. I don't think that, given the state of housing in this country and in the urban areas, I think we need to really kind of push the envelope a little bit and kind of let up off the brake as a government. And as these opportunities present themselves, we can be open to it. So, yeah.
So you're saying to just get rid of rural residential, make it all suburban?
Yeah, that would be my ideal vision, but I'm only one person of 5,300 and something.
Bucket share, anything, right?
Well, I mean, I agree, it's not rural. This is not, we're 3.5 miles from Fountain Square. This is not rural, so.
So maybe just the term is wrong,
I think, yeah. I think
like
that-
using,
Well, I guess it gets into a terminology of what it
I-
feels like, but you're also talking some zoning things.
Yeah, I think it would be sufficient to have traditional residential and suburban residential, and the rural residential just to kind of collapse into the suburban. I see what you're saying, yeah.
Well, actually, I think that would work well, because it would probably fill out organically anyway, just
Yeah.
that people would develop. You know, instead of trying to just have the higher density, medium density, and then it would just, I think it would just work itself out.
Yeah. So,
Are you also suggesting maybe looking at, because that may change the terminology, but doesn't change, like any sort of additional flexibility in terms of multifamily, so that would be something that would need to be looked at
on the zoning scale, yeah, I just want, like, my thought of, and maybe I'm interpreting what the plan is for wrongly, but my thought is, you know, when we have to make that determination on a zoning scale, like, if this is all suburban instead of that, we would be like, yeah, this is what we plan.
Okay, I see what you're saying, I agree, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have a kind of a generic question. I know that tear downs have not been a big, I don't see a lot of evidence in the 7 years I've lived here that tear downs are changing the face of the community. Meaning, that some of the residential parcels are cheap enough to where you can buy 4, collapse them, and build a contemporary house, single family, what I'm trying to do. How does our zoning rules affect that? I mean, as I ride around the community, there might be a couple of open parcels and kind of another building next to it. But the parcels sit there, nothing happens. The house next to the 2 parcels might sell for $60,000, or it's a basic home. Nothing the matter with it, just basic home. But if you look at the 3 parcels together, that they may be worth more to the community as collapsing into a single parcel, which, you know, which then becomes a 21st century solution for the land. And I'm just wondering, how does that work?
So in most cases in the community, I don't think there's anything zoning wise that would really prohibit that.
No, actually, zoning's pretty easy when you consolidate
Okay.
lots. And I think on a city level, though, like I know some cities have lot next door programs. Things like, this is not a planning zoning thing, so we can't really do it here, but like incentivize people to buy the lot next door somehow
We can
and convey it.
goals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've kind of seen it with Red Dot. I mean, that would be the only really close example in town where they purchased a series of lots and a couple existing lots I think they tore it down though, if I'm remembering correctly, but
They tore one house.
They tore one, and they're building a more contemporary home, but I know exactly what you're talking about, and I don't think zoning wise, other than if it's along the avenue in the historic district.
So then therefore, if we don't have any impedance by the rules,
Mhm.
the rules are not impeding it, how can we include some sort of language that makes it clear that we're open to that, and that, you know, because what I read in the Cincinnati area, inside the 275 loop, it's just, there's nothing. And this is an opportunity. And it's so close to downtown, and there's a whole shift in America of urban living, and living close to where all the action is. And I just hate to see us not take advantage of some of that somehow.
No, I think that's a great point, and Kurt, make a note of that, it's something I think maybe we can get into, when we get into housing, because I think that's,
Okay.
you know, there's definitely some goals there about how we do some of these things, and I think that would be maybe something to highlight on, and kind of goes into how we market that.
I think it definitely fits in their goals.
That's the infill movement,
Yeah.
is what it's termed. And Anthony, I'm sure you're seeing this a lot over on the Ohio side of the river, and they're running out of lots or favorable neighborhoods. There is some infill that has gone on in Bellevue, right next door, a couple of lots that have newer homes built on them, or an old home torn down and rebuilt right across from St. Anthony's, in fact. There is a demand for those, the demand hasn't gotten to Dayton yet. Red Knot is really the first infill instance that we've had. And that's why we're gonna make Red Knot a success, so that more of them come in. But yeah, combining lots, taking two 30-foot lots and making them a single 60, that's not really an issue.
No, that's pretty easy, actually.
Yeah. I think
But
they
it
did,
requires
I think they did
survey.
sell another home, I think they sold
Yeah.
2 or 3.
They got flowers hanging off their balcony, so hopefully, someone's taking care of their flowers.
And Dayton's, or Bellevue's full, I mean, it just doesn't really have a lot of infill.
Yeah, in
It's-
terms of future, like 22% undeveloped is,
Yeah,
that's
Yeah.
a lot of opportunity.
For sure.
Michael, you had parking ratios and parks on the riverfront as other concerns. Do you want to kind of,
Sure, so, the parking ratios, is something we've really already kind of taken a hard look at. We made some major changes a few years ago, but it's just something that's gonna continue to recur, especially as we start to get into, one of the things in zoning, and some of the things that you all are gonna address soon is, we've got, when you get off the avenue, when you get off Route 8, which is where we were able to capitalize on some significant parking reductions because of proximity to bus stations, and the historic district helped us out big on that, and things of that nature. But when you get off of that, when you get far enough away where those kind of newer rules don't apply, you're gonna find a lot of really cool older buildings that are gonna be, if they're pre-existing non-conforming, that's why I put conditional uses, kind of figuring out some text changes that could make those relevant again. We're also gonna possibly run into parking problems because they don't have a parking lot on their lot, and there's nothing really close by that they can co-op with. You know, it could negate what they wanted to do, even if you made some zoning changes to allow it being a conditional use. Easier said than done, because you get into restricted parking, they're still gonna have to park somewhere, which is likely on the street, impeding people's parking spaces in front of their homes. So it's just something that we're gonna have to delicately consider in terms of how we make some of these buildings off of Route 8 relevant in terms of their conditional use opportunities, but also, you know, if they have to produce an unrealistic amount of off-street parking spaces on a lot that has no parking lot, it's just the building, you know, what do we do? I don't have an answer for that, it's just something that we're gonna have to really think about.
what are the current parking ratios? I mean, we're not like Blue Ash where it's 3 spots for
No,
everybody, right?
it'll depend on the use. If it's, let's say, you know, a building like, that's gonna, let's just say it's an old church that's gonna be rehabbed into 9 apartment units. Or they have to come up with 1.5 per unit or something.
Something like that, yeah, every use is different, it's like a table.
Off street, and if the only thing on that property is the building, and there's no additional land or parking, then they have to, they have to come up with that somewhere, somehow. And there's only so many private parking lots that you can kind of go up with, because they have to be within a reasonable.
I mean, I think your goals more in the economy side of this plan address the first phases of that, and that we're not quite a walkable neighborhood yet. So it doesn't make sense to take out parking ratios completely, but as we become more walkable, those are discussions I think that are rational. Certain spaces, parking ratios, especially along Lot 8 and things like that.
It's kind of a chicken and egg thing, though.
I mean, arguably, yes and no. I mean, you can't, we could take away parking minimums and expect people to come because we took away parking minimums, but that's not exactly how that always works. I mean, once there's real, like, I don't know what your current office looks like, you're not getting, not every day someone's asking you for a parking variance, I would assume.
So, do they even get a parking variance? I think that's something that could be.
Like, it's not an issue that's coming up every day, right? Or every once a week.
No.
I mean, like, the market forces just aren't there yet.
Well, the interesting part is the parking crunch is really in the corridor in the middle of downtown, along the CBD
Yeah.
and down to 4th Street.
Which is empty at night.
Right, and that's where your most density is. So if you have a 30 by 100 lot with a house on it and 3 cars, and you've only got 30 feet out front, you decided to move into that neighborhood.
Yeah,
If someone was to build a house in an empty lot, I don't think there should be parking requirements, minimum parking requirements for any kind of residential infill like that. For a business, I think the onus would be on the business. I mean, if I want to open up a restaurant on the main street with no parking around for a half mile, and my customers have nowhere to park, that's pretty much on me. I mean, that's a business decision there. How many spaces are enough? I mean, you look at all the empty parking lots in malls and stuff. With I don't know if you read Strong Towns, or a lot of cities are completely doing away with parking minimums. Completely.
Cincinnati has several neighborhoods that have looked into, and one has succeeded in getting rid of parking minimums.
Do they have commercial elements in them too, or are they all residential?
OTR is no parking, there's no parking requirement whatsoever in OTR. Override, sorry.
Can they justify that because of all the private parking that's there? Is that how they-
It's just that was the way the neighborhood was established, that was the original plan of the neighborhood.
Isn't that similar to the original plan of our neighborhood?
Yes, I mean, not once you get up Dayton Pike,
Right, but the route,
Route 8.
you know, below the avenue,
yeah,
there are houses where, you know, before Ford had his dream of everybody having 2 cars in their
yeah, true, but at the same time, that was back when we had a grocery store on every corner.
trip. We also had,
We are a food desert now, so these are things we have to include in our thought process before we go away and move in a 9-unit building with, 18 people and no parking. It's things because they're going to have a car in Dayton at this point. When the economy continues in the current trajectory, that'll be different. So I think it's definitely something that we should mention in goals for transportation, but I don't see too much action being feasible with this thing. That's just my opinion. Again, tell me if I'm wrong on that.
No, I think Joe made a good point. I mean, it's the, I think the conditional use in this sense is more important than the parking ratio, because Joe's right. If a business is coming into town, depending on what their business is, if they need parking and it's not there, they're probably not even gonna bother to call me at that point. The conditional use is much more important because that frees up the use, and the problem we're trying to avoid is, you get a good business in, they're on a tight timeline, and then you gotta tell them, well, man, we love the business, I think it'll fly, but hey, we gotta wait 4 months and do a conditional use text change, and so it's just getting a little bit more, and we've done that before, we got creative with conditional uses, along the avenue, to free up some of these uses for these corner commercial buildings that are in residential
Has
zones.
the city considered doing, automatic incentives such as parking minimums, density variances, setback variances for specified goals such as your environment, like you're rehabbing the building as LEED, or providing affordable housing, you're, bringing in a grocery store in a few desert, that's within the realm of logic for a municipality, right? So, to the mayor.
So the question is that in our logic?
I'm just saying, like, if we're seeing this as an issue, like, I would imagine there's streamlined efforts we can make. Besides putting it into transportation, housing, or in the economy section of this, I don't really see what more effort we can put into it. But we could definitely include it in the bill, and then you guys can act on it for policy purposes.
If I may, parking's the most expensive thing that any municipality provides. Okay? Everybody thinks they own their parking spot out front. You've got to pave it, maintain it, and plow it, and everything else. As an example, down here at Tapestry, for a garage is $150 a month. $150 a month. So all the street parking and off-street parking that the city provides is really a huge cost that everyone's paying for. I'm thinking that not even 10 years down the road, next year with these people moving in down here, they're not gonna be as car-centric.
Yeah, no,
And we have Tank coming through here, one of the most successful Tank routes. There's 3 number 12 buses in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. The walkable community will reduce the need for the parking minimums. If you were to propose at next month's meeting to totally do away with parking minimums, I would probably argue your point. I don't think that, we're too dense. We're too dense. We don't have the spread out area like now Alexandria is doing. So yeah, on the parking requirements, I think as far as the comprehensive plan, I think that we should be moving away from parking minimums.
I guess that's the question. Is there much text in this plan that focuses on parking?
In terms of goals,
And just in terms of general, like, I would imagine it's probably the transportation section. I must have missed over it.
I don't think too much.
For the record, member Tanner, yes, has arrived and is present.
Yeah, it's just more focusing on, the major, minor collectors and materials.
Yeah.
That doesn't reflect.
But I think as a transportation goal, I think, moving away from a car-centric neighborhood would be an easy goal to.
Absolutely.
I have a question under future land use map, the parking ratios. Park on riverfront, now does that mean a green space for people to have a nice time on the river, or is that parking, is that?
On the future,
Like your
Yeah.
points to discuss, things to
Yeah.
consider.
Is that a park as in a place
No.
for kids to be?
so it's both a topic to discuss in terms of continuation of Riverfront Commons, which is something that we're obviously already in the mix of doing. But it's also meant to kind of double back around to the Riverfront Master Plan that we put together several years ago that identified the desire to have a major node somewhere along the trail that would be open as something. music venue or just an open space for
Multi-use.
multi-use. Something that's very, very strong in my heart that I would love to see. It does get a little complicated when you look at, the development agreement and what spaces could be used for that. But that was the point of the topic, was if that's something we wanted to stress. It may not be something we can absolutely do, but if it's something we want to continue to stress. We know we've got the Riverfront Commerce Trail, that's open space, I wouldn't necessarily call it green space, it's open space. But if we wanted to look and continue to at least have it be a desire, we could stress as a goal the continuation of more open, lively public space along the riverfront. It was kind of meant to be multifaceted there.
So does Dayton own or control any segment of that entire riverfront where that opportunity, there's an opportunity that currently exists?
So we looked at where the Berry Street connection point will go, which is kind of right in the middle.
Mhm.
There will be some sort of open space there as a connection node, so that you could physically walk from Berry Street and walk down to the trail. Our vision in the plan was to have a much larger open space, based on the land that's in the contract. It's not gonna be that grand pier that we had envisioned, at least in that point. And we also did have a second location down closer to the marina, which is probably gonna be our best bet for something larger, and just working with the owners down there. But those were the two areas we highlighted, one kind of in the central, I like that because it was centrally located, the other one being closer to the marina. And there's still an opportunity for maybe something of both, it's just something, if it's a desire of the city, we were gonna continue to push for it. It's just kind of one of those, the whole thing is really evolving, and we're just gonna have to wait and see where there's opportunity to make that play.
Any other comments, concerns on land use, future land use?
Sorry if you guys have talked about this already. I assume that's Sergeant Park, very southernmost green space. I've talked to Bob about some ideas out there. Have you guys, has that been brought up yet?
No, we haven't discussed that. And as far as what the future land use could be, we're kind of really locked into that one as park and recreational. Where we take it beyond park and recreational is something we could, would probably best to be talked about with the park board and administration, because obviously it's going to be a park, and we're kind of locked into that.
A community facility, it would fall under that category, right?
We can talk about it then, but even that probably gets a little bit too defined, because
I'm happy to, thank you.
I just wanna make sure I wasn't stepping on it.
No.
The downtown core for the future land use, sorry, I kinda lost my space there. Is there any, with the Berry Street connector, I know last year, maybe it was this year, we reviewed text changes that allowed certain properties that were within I guess, an arm's throw of the urban core to be kind of going back to that traditional use that they were, such as like Bud's Garage, things like that. Is there any options to expand that for future land use, such as up and down Berry, or?
so in terms of like changing the zoning to allow them to be a little bit more open to other zoning possibilities?
Yes.
Yeah, and that kind of gets into the discussion of the particular properties that we feel like we're always intended to be commercial, that have kind of lost any sort of flexibility to be something outside the box. I think it kind of goes back to that conversation.
Yeah, I'm just, from looking at it, I think there's an easy extension, a block down Sixth. And then I think it would, for future purposes, I think an extension up to Fifth across from the school would make sense as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's just kind of my thoughts, but.
You're talking about to capture like the Eagles?
Yeah, also, going down to the Eagles, I mean, with that Berry Street connector, who knows what that future looks like for that state.
That's probably just, because that is, the Eagles is still zone CBD, so I think that's just a matter of maybe making sure we draw that downtown core and include that next half block there. Because it should be already zone CBD, which will give it a plethora of uses, just for that particular building. If we're talking about further down, we would just have to look at the zoning the way we did, those changes we made several years ago on, allowing for more conditional uses based on whatever the parameters we come up with X, Y, Z.
Yeah, because I mean, it allows for single-family residential, it allows for multi-family. It wouldn't affect any residential unless it covers, but it would also allow for growth and mixed-use development as it comes to total. So. Any other comments from the use? Any other comments from the neighborhood, community, sorry? Switching my headsets here. Seeing none, do you want to proceed to the next?
So, I think we can kind of pick up on some of the topics here. This is the housing section. So just to kind of quickly run through some of the goals and objectives. First goal, encourage investment in residential properties and some of those solutions. Provide incentives for the rehabilitation of the existing housing. Review and update city ordinances regarding the maintenance of property. Create community cleanup events to improve the distress of vacant properties. Second goal is strive to increase the rate of owner occupancy over time. Doing that by promoting the state of local assistance programs for first-time home buyers, building stronger relationships with area real estate professionals. And then the last goal, to ensure and promote a diverse range of housing choices. To do that, we can encourage a variety of housing types and densities that meet the needs of residents of all stages of life. Encourage energy-efficient investments to increase long-term affordability. And finally, support the Dayton Housing Authority to provide safe and affordable housing opportunities and related supportive services.
Michael? I got two things on this one.
Sure.
One, does the ensure and promote diverse range of housing options kind of contradict the increased rate of homeowner occupancy?
Yeah, I think you can make that.
Okay. I'm not saying that we should change anything. I like the way this reads. I just want to make sure that we're not, trying to have the left arm and the right arm by each other. The other thing is, on number 3, under the ensure and promote diverse range of housing options, the Dayton Housing Authority is a great asset to this community, right? And they are one of many prongs approach to addressing affordable housing issues. Is there any way we can change that text to be just a little bit more general, that we support affordable housing and providing quality housing, not just specifically to one organization, entity, but to several options?
Sure, we can definitely do that. I think one of the reasons they put that in there is, when they hired Gordon, one of the things we talked about was having them really go beyond where their scope is now. So I think that's why they put it in there specifically, but I think it is, if it does specifically define it, it may be better to keep it a little bit broader.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're getting at. Right?
I know there's a lot of resources out there for this topic, so
Yeah.
I want to be open to using those and bringing in money from other places into the city to provide those for our.
I kind of skipped over including a bunch of the tables, at least for tonight, because again, I think in the next 5 years, we're gonna see a lot of those figures change, and a lot of that's gonna be geared towards what's being developed on the riverfront. We have 350 units under construction right now. Knock on wood, they're getting ready to close on financing on another 300. And those are gonna be a mix of for sale, and for rent. So we could go over those things tonight, but I thought it was kind of, not irrelevant, but it's not gonna do us much good. We just have no way of knowing how those numbers are gonna skew. A couple of things though I did, again, these are just kind of things that I threw out there to consider. Feel free to take the discussion in any direction you choose, but again, Manhattan Harbor is gonna affect a lot of the statistics that we're seeing here tonight. One of the things that we're not gonna find in the plan that I wanted to share tonight is when the Catalytic Fund does their yearly recap of the housing market for all the river cities. A few of the things they always note in our section is that we have several, they call it oasis developments, Manhattan Harbor being an oasis development, River Point, kind of Grant Park, we've got some of those higher end things, and the big problem that comes in every year is 2%, so this is based on 2017, 2% of our housing sales come from mid-range buyers, 150,000 to 250,000 price range. So we have a distinct shortage of inventory for that category. So just kind of something to keep in mind. I think it tackles on to some of the things that Roy was touching on. How do we maybe, what strategies do we have to change that? Certainly infill development can help that. But I thought that was a pretty eye-opening number to see that how low that is. We have a lot in the high-end range. We have a lot in the low-end range, but we're really lacking on our middle range. So really kind of gives us a key area on some areas that we need to focus on. So I'll do that in there. And then Cindy and I talked about this at length. It kind of gives us an opportunity to look at these individual neighborhoods and figure out how do we grow and promote their identity. So with that, I'll turn it over to you all for this session.
What can we, the city, do more to promote rehabbers who are taking houses that are $30,000 and then directly next to those mid-range buyers? Is there any type of incentives that we can offer? Any type of marketing that we can do? Because someone said Bellevue's full. We're the next down the lot. So we should be able to reach out to these folks who are looking to make a profit and also build our neighborhoods.
You know, I struggle with this one in terms of just what the best strategy is. There's certainly some things that we could do if you wanted to get, really creative in terms of putting, money out there to support some sort of an incentive. So if you look at kind of a CCAP program on a residential side, we just always found it a little bit more difficult to scale that large in the long term because of just so many more houses, and the demand for that would be off the charts, and how far would it go? In terms of if you don't offer anything locally with our own money, it tends to become just kind of a market. You've got to wait for the market conditions to be right. I know there's some people in town that have had really good success flipping homes, but they're doing it at a buy at a 30, sell at a 90, or up to maybe like 120 category. So it kind of gets us up into that range. But some of them are doing it to sell to first-time home buyers or people that are going to live there and not just rent it out. And then on the other side, we have the people, that are coming in town. They're just going to flip it as fast as possible. But they don't really have the community. The community interest at heart. They're just looking to turn a buck, and that's their prerogative. That's their business. But I mean, in terms of if you don't offer anything specifically with our own money, it becomes kind of a market thing. It's just the market will dictate the conditions, and you can say we'll wait for it to come. I think we feel that it's starting, but that's just my opinion.
To that point, I will say, one, the market in general, with the middle class shrinking, there are more resources for the low end, there's more resources for the high end, which is why we're seeing what you commented on earlier. The middle housing market is shrinking, just like Amazon's growing and Dollar Tree's growing, and everything in the middle is shrinking. Same thing with retail, same thing with housing. In terms of, we have a goal in the housing section, provided it's like the STAR goal. I guess that's the star on the goals. Is that like the most?
I think it was the most heavily flagged during the public
Yeah.
session.
It's like the primary objective of it says provide written incentives for rehabilitation existing housing. I will comment on that in that I have discussed with several rehabbers in Dayton, and the traditional business model is $35 a square foot on a flip. At that price point, you are talking drastic quality reduction.
Yeah, 35.
Yeah, I mean, self-performing, you really should be looking in the $80 a square foot. Non-self-performing, $150. And the 35, it's great. It gets you to the 180 $1,000 price point, they make a big buck, they move on. But then you have homeowners who are buying houses, premium prices, you have to replace vinyl siding within a year. You know, it's not appropriate. So if you guys do craft an incentive based on this goal, keep those things in mind.
Yeah, this is the most difficult, I think, one that we'll approach, because at least it's my mindset, you know, we were able, and Anthony, you were, you know, worked on this, we were able to kind of revitalize the CBD with incentive. We would go broke doing an incentive for housing with very little noticeable difference. It just doesn't go a long way, we would go broke trying. So it's nice and easy to say, well, we want to encourage investment, we want to offer incentives. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
To fund a viable program that's really actually going to make a difference.
Have you guys looked into applying for CDBG funds through the state's
Yeah.
programs, the fund loan programs such as this?
Sadie, did you have something else?
No, I was just thinking, we're talking about rehabbing, and do we have any control on the rehabbers? Do they have to be licensed or anything? I was reading that
No, I mean,
a lot of people in Bellevue have been
permits.
taken by somebody that made everything look great, and then when they moved in, you know, the plumbing didn't work and all that sort of
Lipstick
thing.
I mean, they have to meet the building code, but it's, you know.
Who checks the building code? We have a building inspector?
The county building.
The county
inspector.
building.
County, okay.
The problem with that, and, you know, I work in that department with the building inspectors, is that building code is the absolute bare minimum. I mean, you can do much better.
Yeah,
You can do a lot better.
it's fair minimum.
And it's amazing that some people won't even meet the minimum,
Right, that's
because they're just blowing through this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I would like to personally see them, but they only are held to that minimum standard.
right. Because, I mean, in 5 years, you're gonna have a lot of houses that are junked again.
Yeah.
You're gonna have slums again.
So yeah, I mean, to that point, I just think as you guys try to move forward with this goal, it would be in the city's best interest to provide an incentive so we can kind of mitigate issues like that.
If I could address that, I hate incentives. I really do, because what dollar amount is enough? We have incentives in the central business district, the CCAP program that you designed. We could put in a restaurant and pay for that restaurant, all of their expenses, and subsidize it as an incentive to have a restaurant, but it's kind of pointless if the market does not demand a restaurant. We'd be wasting money, I feel. I remember 2008, 2009. All of a sudden, the bottom fell out of the housing market. I say, let the flippers and the developers and the infill developers take that risk. Our incentive, our help should be to market Dayton. Market Dayton as a great place to live, as a safe place to live, as a good investment for flippers. There should be no reason why our houses are sitting on the markets for weeks. They should be getting snapped up like in other communities. I think the marketing part of it, the branding of Dayton and the marketing of Dayton, is what the city can do, because you can turn that tap off and on real easy. But if you go out there and say, okay, we're gonna offer you $10,000 to flip a house, and all of a sudden 30 people come in, we don't have that money.
So this isn't really a place for a policy discussion.
Understood.
Um,
But it's part of the plan.
I do fundamentally disagree with you as a person, not as an individual. Just my personal perspective. I disagree with you, Joe. Just like I disagree with that philosophy. There is with housing, there are true gaps. The market is only going to support $190,000 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. To get that quality that we really need, so that we can market Dayton better, so that we don't have vinyl siding warping and plumbing breaking within 2 years of a home purchase or home sale, you have to hit a minimum square footage price, and that in essence creates a gap. The developer needs a cut. He's an investor. He has to make investment. So these are all things that can easily be. There's ways to mitigate risk. There's ways to evaluate this stuff. The market's not there. Like Michael said, the market is trending to the very bottom and trending to the very top. So if it is the city's goals to attract that middle income bracket, 150K to 250K, the government in my opinion, has to provide something to attract that. It's not
Well, we
gonna-
do have
the
the
market's not gonna
five-year-
provide it itself.
Moratorium?
We do have the 5-year moratorium on the taxable value of the house for city taxes. You buy a house, your city tax rate is based on what you bought it for 5 years if you apply for it. So that is a pretty strong incentive that I'm not sure many other localities offer. County taxes, and that's separate, but as far as the city taxes, so in that way, we do incentivize improving the property
that's a-
value.
Great incentive, it's a good incentive tool. I will say, traditional financing on residential portions, you're looking at 15-year terms for financing,
Mhm.
and sell at 16, because that's pretty much the cap of their appreciation they're gonna get. They refinance at 15, so if at any point you guys consider expanding on that, extending that term would really go a long way, I think. Before we move on, in the text of the housing portion of the plan, the housing cost affordability portion, it says the word, and this is, I know I'm nitpicking, I'm sorry. It says generally refers to 30% of an income. I mean, that's the nationwide industry standard, so, I mean, if you're paying over 30% of your income towards housing, you're house poor. And your income, your housing cost includes your rent or mortgage payment, your taxes, and your utilities. So I'd just like to see that definition cleared up. And I know you mentioned the population's gonna change and Manhattan Harbor is gonna really create a distinct, different Dayton in 5 years, but I think in terms of the tables, an AMI breakdown, area median income breakdown, would go a long way in determining policy.
It's hard for me to believe that we only have 47 public
Yeah.
housing counts a day. I mean, it seems like every block's got at least one HUD house, sometimes more. That figure kind of makes me curious.
Anything else for housing? Anthony, you want to keep moving along?
Does anybody need to take a break, water, bathroom? Are you good? I think we can move on. I would suggest that we give it another 45 minutes. So, do you just want to get through
Till 9 o'clock.
EV, and then maybe take a break, like kind of call it a day, come back in December?
Yeah, totally up to you. Yep, so the next category, economic development. Two main goals here. First, to promote investment in the central business district to attract and retain businesses. Different ways to produce that. Develop a marketing strategy, we'll do here, touch on that. To attract visitors and advertise Dayton's local businesses. Create development packages that illustrate the potential of available sites. And number 3, utilize the city's commercial community advantage program to implement uniform signage and facade improvements. And then the second goal, create a supportive entrepreneurial network, doing that by creating a monthly economic update e-newsletter and streamline the process to obtain an occupational business license. The one kind of thing I had in kind of reviewing this, and from my perspective, I kind of envision us, and this will be up to council really, kind of coming towards the end of the CCAP cycle. I think what we've accomplished with that has been far exceeded our best expectations, and has really revitalized our central business district. But we are kind of towards the end of that, so based on the discussion tonight and certainly with council, I kind of had the idea of, if we're kind of gearing away from that, maybe being a little less specific to a particular program, and just maybe mention that, make reference to maybe strategic investments of our economic development funds that are maybe geared towards opportunities as they come along in terms of job creation, retention, expansion, not only as they pertain to our central business district, but also our other, commercial and industrial districts as well. So I kind of felt it is touching on a viable program, but maybe being a little less specific in terms of what we're gonna gear towards, some of our funding towards. So, a few other things, and some of these they kind of overlap from some of the things we talked about, but, what's the future of the I-1 zone? So we talked about the zoning challenges, now kind of talking about, how do we spur additional economic development down there? Well, I think we need to take a hard look at what it is and who it is we're trying to attract down there. So if we do look at the zoning to be a little bit more creative of, what type of businesses will be allowed down there, allowing us to kind of hone in and do some scouting and some recruiting on some of the businesses that are maybe a little bit outside or a little bit of the changing economic environment that could bring in additional payroll revenue for the community. Again, zoning changes to encourage different style of businesses, not just in our industrial zones or our business districts, but again, to kind of highlight on some of these older commercial buildings that are in residential zones. And then, again, follow up that zoning changes to free up pre-existing non-conforming uses, which goes hand in hand with that. So I'll turn it over to you all to